Hello and a warm welcome in joining us for the President's Design Awards Creating a Better World by Design series, using less to create more impact. My name is Juliana Yao and I'll be your MC for today. The President's Design Award, or PDA for short, is Singapore's highest accolade for designers and designs across all disciplines. Organized by the Design Singapore Council and the Urban Redevelopment Authority, this is the 13th cycle of the award. The last crop of 11 PDA 2020 recipients were awarded on 30th of June 2021. To find out more about these recipients, do visit the traveling exhibition, which is currently at its last week at the Singapore University of Technology and Design Campus Centre Level 2, which is happening until the 31st of March 2022. The next call for entries for PDA 2023 will be launching in September this year, so please do follow Design Singapore Council on Instagram for exciting updates. I do also want to run through a couple of house rules just to keep today's session running as smoothly as possible. Firstly, please be informed that this webinar will be recorded and that your microphones will be muted throughout the session. However, you are most welcome to submit questions through the Zoom Q&A function, and the speakers will be addressing them during our Q&A segment. Should you encounter any technical issues, please ping our technical team through the Zoom chat function. For BOA and SIA members joining us today, there will be 2 CPD points credited for this webinar. So please do stay until the end of the webinar to fill in the survey form with your respective details to qualify for the CPD points. In today's session, we'll hear from 3 of our PDA 2020 recipients on projects that have used less materials, costs, and even labor to create a positive impact on the economy, community, society, quality of life, and the environment. So how can designers address the interest and demand for positive impact while keeping in mind that our resources are limited and adopt a regenerative design approach? We hope to tackle this big question with our panel of speakers today. So it is now my pleasure to introduce the PDA 2020 recipients on our panel. Firstly, we have Professor Carlos Banon, Director and co-founder of the Architectural Intelligence Research Lab, or AirLab, at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. Second, we have architect Paul Chi, Director at Woha Architects. And last but not least, we have Mr. Prasoon Kumar, co-founder of BillionBricks. Our moderator for today would be Dr. Hossein Rezai, Director of Web Structures. Dr. Rezai is the PDA 2020 Jury Vice Chair of the Design Panel and also the PDA 2016 Designer of the Year recipient. He is joining us from Canada this afternoon and would like to specially thank Dr. Rezai for joining us at such a late hour at night. Now, before we begin the session, we will get to know a little bit more about you. So tell us a little bit more about your background and which fields you are currently working or perhaps studying in via the poll that will be launching on your screen. You can choose more than one option if that applies to you. So you should be able to see a couple of these options popping up on your screen at this point in time. We have architecture, which I imagine most of you would be from, but perhaps you are also from product and industrial design. Maybe it's UI, UX design, visual communications and advertising, interior design, maybe other design disciplines, or perhaps you're not even in a design discipline, but you're keen to perhaps make a career switch or to find out more about some of these sustainable practices today. So really here to find out a little bit more about our audience. So perhaps some of the questions can be catered to that in the Q&A session later on as well. So just taking a look at the results. And as expected, we have most of our audience here today, 92% of you, in fact, from the architecture field. So certainly you guys are here to find out more about how you can, incorporate some of these learnings into what you do on a daily. We do see 1% in product and industrial design, 2% of you, a very, very small percentage, probably just 1 or 2 of you in the other design disciplines. So very interesting to know. And that little 2% of you in non-design disciplines. So just great to know where our audience is from today. a little bit more about you, but now we're going to dive straight into the sharing by our speakers. So without further ado, let us welcome our very first speaker for today, Professor Carlos Banon. As director and co-founder of the Architectural Intelligence Research Lab at SUTD, Carlos leads the multidisciplinary research laboratory focusing on architecture, science, arts, digital design, and manufacturing. They combine new technologies and digital manufacturing to create efficient, light, and versatile products that aim to increase sustainability and reduce wastage in construction. His team received the PDA 2020 Design of the Year for the AirMesh Pavilion, the first in the world to be made out of 3D printed stainless steel components. So over to you, Carlos. Carlos, I'll have you unmute your mic. I think you might be on mute.
Okay, thank you very much, Juliana, and the whole President Design Award team for arranging this fantastic event. Very excited to be speaking here and to see everyone joining us. So I would like to talk about like the some of the concepts that I've been working recently applied to the design that is mentioned here, the AirMesh Pavilion, but some others as well that I will present today. So I'm gonna try to go through my slides. Still cannot see the slides in the screen. Are they on? I only can see my slide right now.
Okay. Carlos, perhaps you can try clicking on the next slide. The clicker is on.
Yeah, I'm trying. Sorry, I'm gonna move the slides now. It doesn't react. Okay, finally, yeah, sorry. Okay, so moving on, sorry about that. Starting with this slide to portray the kind of the big problem that we have in construction industry, that we create more than 20 million tons of construction waste every year. So one of the things that we do in AirLab is to look for new technologies that can lower the energy that we use in production, and also to create zero waste products, right? So we try to address sustainability from different sides. 3D printing is one of them. We really believe strongly in this technology. And also we look at the creation of more sustainable spaces using less resources and materials by placing it where actually is needed. So we started looking at the typology of the space frames. Actually, it's a very old typology. We have seen structures everywhere in the cities, like sports halls, many places in the world, like they have this typology everywhere. Creates these regular grids, allows for a certain level of flexibility, certain degree of it. And this is the standard system. Basically, you have a node, and then you have bars connecting towards a node in standardized angles. So we have this question. This is a kind of a well-proven technology that really works over time, but it allows for a certain degree of flexibility, but not a lot. Can we challenge that construction typology so that we can create more efficient structures? So with that vision in mind, we'll look at what actually exists in the market and what could be the vision of the future of those structures that allows for free-form, geometric continuity, and extreme slenderness by spreading the load in more slender components. So looking at nature as a source of inspiration, like looking at neural networks and its hyper redundancy and interconnectivity, we developed a concept whereby the nodes were generated by the forces that runs through the system. So we 3D print a bespoke component that can integrate those components that actually are standard profiles. So we can create complex networks. And then is when digital design takes place. To address that complexity, now we have the aid of tools, right? Tools are not the answer, but it's a mean to really achieve certain goals. In this case, to reduce the material to the minimum and to achieve maximum freeform in our designs. So you can see here from the top left to the bottom right, the sequence that we use to generate the nodes from the forces and the vectors, we create the complex nodes for each of the points where actually we place the material. And the good thing here is that thanks to 3D printing, we can granularly decide where not to place the material, which is more important than where to place it, because we can decide where not are we putting material at the almost like a scale of the millimeter. So that allows us to really reduce the weight. So you can see one of the nodes that we developed for the AirMesh project. So I would say it's mostly made of air. The volume actually that you can see is 90% air. So we develop further the connection system. So develop the interface between the standard components and the 3D printed parts. So we calculate the structure with finite element analysis, and we assign a section to the bars that actually defines the shape of the nodes. So what you can see here is one of these nodes, right? This complex geometry is real-time generated with our script. So we can create a bespoke connection for each of the parts of the structure that can integrate the different bars with different profiles in the structure. Creating a network-based complex. So we can start with just 3 components, and we can actually add more as needed. So the more we add, actually, the more we can spread the load into thinner components, thinner parts, that allows for more flexibility and to spread the load more efficiently through the system. So instead of using system of beams and columns, we're using this spatial network that addresses structures in a way more efficient way. So we wanted to achieve that geometric freedom, and that's why we developed the AirMesh Pavilion. So the AirMesh Pavilion sits at the Gardens by the Bay. Look at the views as the way to define the geometry. We have 4 points, 3 landmarks, and the access point that defines the geometry of the pavilion. Is quite straightforward. Just the 4 vectors define the shape. You can see here the section, but below you can see the configuration. The spatial configuration actually is a 2-layer. You create a volume so that the structure is more efficient. It's made out of tetrahedrons. So the most basic structure, spatial structure that we have, tetrahedrons, are deformed and adapt to create any shape. That's done with our script. So we can discretize any geometry into tetrahedrons. We can actually build efficiently based on the structures that are running through the members. Those nodes, these 54 nodes, are digitally created with our script. So those nodes are of different shapes, different proportions, different weights, and we use 3D printing to fabricate them. This one actual node, and the interface and connection between the bar and the node can be performed in only that. So it reduces the time that it takes to build these structures. And a structure like this, about 35 square meters, took only 2 days with a team of researchers. We're actually not construction company, was basically us putting the bars and the bolts together. So that is it's a huge improvement, because we can develop and fabricate and assemble a high performance structure in minutes using just a hex key to connect. This is the materiality of the pavilion. We have created this space that still is in Gardens by the Bay for the next few months. You can actually visit there close to the Bayfront Pavilion. It's just a space where you can sit down, you can chill, you can look at the views, you can experience lightness. And at night, you have this very nice light effects thanks to LED strategically placed in the sides to create different nuances next to the lake at the Gardens by the Bay. So moving on, we also want to make more impact using reduced resources. So we don't care about the scale or materials or production. We can tackle it throughout them. So we look at the way to implement the system also in furniture scale. So how to design a table that can transfer the load into just 3-minute points, like smaller than a, I don't know, 50 cents coin. So can we transfer this 200 kg into 3 points? So we use the AirMesh system to prove it right. Those bars are extremely thin, like 6-millimeter diameter, and the precision is extreme, how they connect seamlessly between nodes and bars, and how can create a complex network throughout them. You can see here the final result, how the table can withstand the load, surface load of a table, and only touching in very, very little surface. So we also explored that with bamboo, how to redefine traditional construction using 3D printing to reduce the utilization of resources, but also embrace the use of bamboo. This is actually a carbon sink and definitely can help us achieve like sustainable designs. And the way that we did it this time was to scan using 2D scanners the shape of the bamboo and to 3D print a connector that fits exactly to the shape of each of the bamboo poles because they're irregular. So with that system, we can create a bespoke component in minutes, and we can interface the bamboo in a quite novel way, allow us to create canopies or even disaster relief structures that can be deployed in just hours. We have used the same technology as well for farming systems to create a 100% biodegradable system, A-frame system that can be, instead of the nodes, now we have the troughs, so we can grow plants there, and it's adapted to any geometry. We have tested that with our industry partner CDL, and we are actually scaling up to a larger scale really soon. And lastly, I think we only have 10 minutes. So I want to conclude this break with just small art piece that we finished recently that tackled the problem of waste. That is a huge problem. And now we're getting more and more requests from industry on how to address waste in designs. So now the briefs that we get as designers are very different than we had before. They know what you want to do as an industry partner. In this case, it's like, well, we have a lot of waste, and then you guys as designers, you should try to do something with it, right? So we came up with this design for Chanel that I'm presenting here right now. Restore the connection of the started models using 3D printing, and also creating a complex interface between the models and parts. And it's very important to raise awareness about this problem. How can we stand the life of the products that we discard, even at the world scale? This is the first of its kind. We are looking at implementing it into Chanel stores in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Carlos. And our next speaker is architect Paul Chi, director at Woha Architects. She leads the project teams through design execution and implementation of innovative and award-winning private and public projects. Over the last decade, Woha has been researching and innovating new architectural and urban solutions to tackle the challenges of climate change, rapid loss of biodiversity, population growth, and urbanization. Her team received the PDA 2020 Design of the Year for Kampong Admiralty, a groundbreaking project that was a successful integration of a complex, socially driven brief while maintaining a human-centric approach. So Paul, over to you, please.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Am I loud and clear? Yes, okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to introduce Kampong Admiralty, this project, and the design ideas behind it. We were able to work on this project with multiple government agencies to come up with a new prototype to bring the Kampong spirit, which celebrates healthy communal living, into the urban setting of the 21st century. This prototype demonstrate an innovative mixed use that has potential to be adaptable and multiplied. And it shows how buildings can be urban infrastructure and ecosystem that improves the quality of greenery, community space, and biodiversity in cities. The site is located next to the train station, a prime location in terms of real estate value. The building and its public space are connected to this public transport network and actually have become a natural urban focal point. The site is highlighted in red. It's in a mature housing estate in Singapore, and which conventionally comprise of residential blocks in a town center with standalone amenities. Now the site is next to the MRT station, highlighted in blue, and is also accessible by major arterial roads. Multiple existing pedestrians and cycling routes cuts through it towards the train station and the park connectors. Here, the site is chosen for its strategic location in a mature town. So in the next few slides, I'll take you through a series of design diagrams to explain the layering of the different programs. The footprint of the site is about 9,000 square meter in area. And the project brief has 4 key components: commercial, medical center, community programs, and public housing for the elderly. So these are facilities run by different government agencies, and co-locating them on this the challenge we face is how to accommodate all the facilities in this very small site, which is slightly less than 1 hectare. And we propose vertically stacking them up, which means many of the facilities could not be located on the ground floor. And the challenge is to have a design that elevate the concerns of the agencies and overcome the challenge of the site constraint. The first key move was to put the supermarket, retail shops, and food center on the ground layer. By compacting the commercial footprint over 2 floors, we free the ground floor for a tropical plaza. And the next move was to overlay the large footprint of the medical center over the plaza. This provides shade and shelter for the plaza, which is crucial for its usability in the tropics. By lifting the medical center to the mid-layer, all weather activities can now take place in a fully public, porous, and pedestrianized plaza below. The high volume also allows natural daylight and breezes through, ensuring a high degree of thermal comfort for people. The next key move was to overlay the community uses of a quieter nature, such as the childcare, elder care, and public housing to the upper layer. And over this, a new elevated ground level was created by introducing a community sky park where young and old can come together. This community sky park with its gardens and urban farms adopt a topographical architectural language of terraces and hills. And at the foothill of the community sky park, we introduced the apartment blocks of the public housing for elderly, and the hills effectively shielded the apartments from the train noise, which is behind the building. So instead of a standalone program, it is now a layered integrated urban village. The freed ground level and new elevated ground level generates more horizontal surfaces for landscape and people as a result. Let's take a closer look at how we layered the program vertically through a section of the building complex. Here are 2 basements for car parking, which is below ground. And the lower layer of this building comprises 2 floors. The ground floor is a porous tropical plaza that brings the community together. The ground is designed to prioritize pedestrian circulation through the building to the train station. The plaza is a bright and breezy double volume space that serves as a community living room. It is activated by shops and a food center at the upper layer. And the oculus in the center opens up to light air and views of the community sky park above. The plaza now is a popular social space and provides daily conveniences to residents. Moving up to the mid layer, we spread the medical center over 2 floors. The footprint of the medical center covers almost the entire site, and all the internal waiting and circulation areas are organized around a center garden courtyard. Architecturally, the medical center is like an umbrella sheltering the plaza below, and it's also acting as a supporting floor for the landscape above. This is a view of the medical center. We've all experienced hospital, especially waiting areas, as quite sometimes sterile, uncomfortable places. But here, the courtyard brings natural daylight and green into the medical center. Leveraging on the biophilic effect that nature has on humans, the central rain garden helps to promote a sense of healing and well-being. So the waiting area with daylight from the garden courtyard. Patient areas such as the rehab gym and training rooms all look into gardens. The upper layer of the building comprises quieter, more private community facilities. The 6-story floor plan is where the community sky park forms the new elevated ground level for childcare, elder care, and community gardens and playgrounds. The apartment windows actually opens to a view of the community sky park. And childcare and elder care are side by side at this level and also adjacent to landscape outdoors. So this adjacency of program actually brings the young and old together, encouraging intergenerational bonding. So they share the playground and outdoor exercise station. And, while doing that, they could socialize with each other and also at the same time take care of an urban community farm. So the idea of locating the farm on the rooftop encourages the elderly to be active. Of course, we have lifts and ramps that are provided to help person using wheelchairs. This is the public housing block. It's 8 units per floor, and the units are modular and designed with barrier-free access. They are arranged in pairs with buddy nooks at shared entrances for neighbors to sit, chat together and make friends. This is a view of the apartment blocks, sort of growing out of the park and surrounded by large landscape. The buddy nooks are benches designed to encourage interaction at shared entrances of each pair of apartments. So main doors are usually kept open for ventilation. In this case, it also helps neighbors to keep watch over each other. For passive environmental strategies, we use it to achieve green performance for the building. So all the public spaces and apartments are designed for natural ventilation and hence not reliant on air conditioning. And the precast facade, we created deep sunshade and also colorful to add visual orientation and interest. All the roof surfaces are landscape and is good for reducing thermal load. Embracing landscape brings benefit of being able to look out to greenery and being close to nature. In Kampong Admiralty, we have a planting palette that encourages biodiversity. The result is a good, healthy number of species of insects, birds, and fruit bats now. With 0.9 hectares footprint, we actually has almost 50 over projected species, which is captured in our post-occupancy biodiversity survey. So the survey that we did was also extended to a nearby neighborhood park, and we compared the two. The park is almost the same site footprint as well, almost a hectare, but actually it has less projected species at 39. So it's 56 versus 39. So compared to a conventional neighborhood park, which is likely mostly hard landscape and with little variation in planting palette, the landscape in this building performs far better as we made this biodiversity comparison. So imagine if we have 10 of this more than 100% landscape replacement buildings, and when we make connections between them, it's performing equivalent to a typical 10-hectare city neighborhood park. So this is the potential of the project as a prototype. The approach in Kampong Admiralty is multiplying and maximizing the building system of greenery and community spaces, making the system both useful and enjoyable. So these are calculations that we did of what has been achieved in the building, which is 110% landscape replacement compared to site area and 150% community spaces. This building is in use since 2017 and is inclusive and successful. And I'm happy to say that the government also has made some plans to develop similar prototypes in other towns. Okay, with this, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pearl, for your insightful sharing. Next, we have Mr. Prasoon Kumar, co-founder of BillionBricks. Prasoon co-founded BillionBricks in 2012 as a nonprofit that uses design and technology to reimagine housing and to solve the global housing crisis in a completely new way. So for the PDA 2020, Prasoon's team received the Design of the Year award for the Etania Green School, a learning ecosystem designed for the stateless children whose parents work in the oil palm plantations of Sabah. So welcome, Prasoon.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I'm going to talk about the project Etania Green School, but really end my presentation with kind of a thought-provoking idea on the theme today, which is using less to create more impact. I really feel that the purpose of these conversations is really not to know so much about the projects. I think there's enough material online that we can read today, but really to kind of go back with some questions that can bring change in the work that we do on a daily basis. So I think I'll probably start with a little bit of introduction. I mean, BillionBricks was founded in 2013 as a nonprofit, but as of 2022, we've actually shifted to now being a for-profit enterprise, but with still a similar vision of addressing the housing challenge that the world is facing. The key principle behind founding BillionBricks was really to the idea that oftentimes when we do buildings for the poor or when we work for the community, we are too much driven by the idea of making the buildings cheaper, and that drives most of the decision making, and design kind of takes the back seat. But the idea is really of giving equal opportunities through design to as many people as possible, because we as designers do believe in the fact that it adds to a lot more layers of value for the people. So the project that I'm going to talk about is a project that deals with students in Malaysia. And there are actually about 50,000 children in Malaysia which are considered to be stateless. So what that means is that they have no citizenship rights for any country in the world. So they live in Malaysia, but their parents come from countries such as Philippines and Indonesia to work in oil plantations. When they're born in Malaysia, Malaysia doesn't recognize them as citizens, and Philippines and Indonesia also fail to as well. So they live quite deep in the plantations, quite cut off from rest of the community. And Etania is the organization that we partnered with, which runs schools very deep inside these communities to provide education to them. And what they do is that they go in and find, say, for example, abandoned buildings or some shopping centers, which are, again, very, very obscure. And they kind of take some rooms in it in which they build schools, and they find local teachers and teach them. So this is kind of one of the classrooms that they had. So for us, the key thing was that these children and students, they've really been deprived of all kind of human rights that we can think of. And education is, I think, far beyond on their radar as well. I mean, they're not even recognized as a citizen in any part of the world, was to really provide a sense of place which belongs to them, and it's a school or a building which has really been created for them, and not something which is adapted and being donated and stuff to them as well. So dignity and pride was a key criteria when we started designing this building. And that really gave a lot of impetus on how we looked at the landscape, the building design, and various aspects of really setting the building into that space as well. The other aspect was that the fact that they are very resource constrained in terms of the teaching aids, like our kids have access to textbooks and computers and stuff. They have very limited access to resources. But how can we use the environment itself as a teaching aid, and how can we create opportunities for teachers, for students, for parents to kind of learn from that environment rather than create artificial means to teach them. And I think we were also very advantaged with the kind of site we had, with the amount of foliage and water and the proximity to a river that really created that opportunity. And even as architects, and considering the fact that 98% of us today here are architects, was really an exciting opportunity for us as well to kind of maximize on the opportunities that came in. But it's important to recognize that this is in a part of Malaysia, which is in Sabah, which is home to some of the largest primary forests in the world and the largest sinks of carbon in the world as well. And they have been being raised at a massive pace, and we all have some responsibility towards it. We use materials, food products, toothpastes, toothbrushes, makeup materials, which are all made from these palm oil plantations, which are being done by removing all these trees. And we understand these things, but we are not able to reduce our footprint towards it. So this was a great recognition for us as well. The site was also, like I said, very close to the river, which in case of this river in Beaufort has a habit of flooding every couple of years. And the floods are so high that I remember going there for the site visit, and we were sitting in a restaurant and you could actually see the water level marks on the wall, which were about 2 meters above the ground level. So it really floods fairly deep inside, and we had to kind of manage it. And we didn't really have to learn anything from there. You could go around and look at the houses that people have been built and buildings. They're generally stilted up, or if they find a higher plane, they kind of just put it on the higher. So there isn't really a rocket science to building those things, right? And we kind of adopted those things to say, can we create an artificial hill, or can we find systems to prop up the building, which are both recycled materials like you see, which are the containers here, but also as a system to reduce the costs of the building as well. So for us, it was a clean site. I mean, there were a couple of trees that we preserved on the site. We took a part of the land itself, and we created a mound out of it, which created one part of the structure, and we ensured that that kind of is to the height of a shipping container. And then we built a couple of very light structure that you can see as columns to float literally the building on top of it. We had access to these containers from a donor from San Francisco, so we got them shipped from a port in Malaysia, and the initial idea for everyone was to use the containers as a way to actually use these for housing the children. But we realized that it's very expensive and very hot in these climates, and actually to do these kind of changes as well. We use very few materials. This is the entire material palette that you can see that we used to build the school. And we really used aids, which becomes a fun way for children to start interacting with the school. The orientation was really where they can actually look into the river on one side, a very linear school with corridor and rooms on either side. And then it could be extended as the school's needs would grow. So this has about 5 classrooms in it. It was designed for rainwater harvesting, for solar panels. So entire energy is used by solar panels. There's rainwater collection, which happens in the pond that we created, and the sewage is cleaned up onto the site as well. So I think the interesting thing about the school is really the fact that the outside and inside, as you can see, are really one, right? So, and I remember going there and speaking to teachers, and they said that at times use the classrooms as the dance theaters, but they use the outside under the tree area as a classroom as well. So it's really a space for people to make on their own. But the thought I want to leave you is really on the title of today's subject, which is using less to create more impact. And if you just look at what was used less in this current particular project, the construction cost was very, very low. None of us that worked on the project took any salaries. The teachers are paid a very minimal salary as well. And the materials were kind of recycled. And as you can see, the material palette was very less used as well. And therefore, the energy and the consumption of resources in the building is very, very less. On the more side, the impact was really that these stateless children could get access to a school. We could introduce a new design typology by using these materials. And we received a lot of awards and publicity other than the PDA as well. And you can see it online as well, right? So the point really is that in reality, this more impact is very small in terms of the problem that we are trying to address. So here there are 50,000 children, but all the school does is serves 240 children. So we may think that the impact is very large, that these things are scalable, but they hardly ever scale. And in fact, even though kids are proud of it, this is the picture of the school that my kids go to. I think if we would have designed a similar building, we may not have received the awards, but probably the children would have still loved it as much as possible. So the point I want to make is really that the more impact side in such a scenario is more about us having a new design typology that we can talk about, get excited about, get these awards and publicity, but the impact on the ground is quite minimal. And we have to figure out how can we overcome this? And I think the way to overcome this, that using less in reality creates less impact. We have less money, we create less of these schools for these children. We have less money to pay ourselves, we can't do so much of work, and we have less materials, we can again build less number of schools. So we really need to change our thinking and do more to create more impact. And not just talk about it, but actually take action in doing these more things if we really believe in more impact. So thank you for that. And then I'm happy to answer questions and looking for the discussion with the rest of the panelists and Dr. Rizai.
All right, thank you very much, recipients, for all your sharing. And of course, right now we will be jumping into our moderation session. So I'm going to hand the time over to our moderator, Dr. Hossein Rizai, for the Q&A session. Dr. Rizai is an engineer, a design visionary, and an educator. He is the first and only engineer to receive the PDA Designer of the Year as one of the initiators of the concept of fusion engineering. He is passionate about the process of advanced computational design and a holistic approach to architecture and structure and the environment. In addition to having been on the PDA Design jury panel in 2018 and 2020, he is the first practitioner in Singapore to have been invited to join the master jury of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. So let us welcome Dr. Rizai and recipients.
Thank you, Juliana, for that introduction, and thank you, Carlos, Pearl, and Prasoon for the beautiful presentation on 3 truly deserving PDA winning designs. The time is just past 1 a.m. here in Vancouver, where I'm visiting. And you've managed to more than keep me awake with those beautiful presentations. Thank you for that. In my experience, good presentations tend to receive 2 diametrically opposing reactions from the audience. They either leave us in awe and therefore generate no questions from or interactions with the audience. Alternatively, they motivate us to want to know more with multiple questions and inquiries. Let's see what reactions we get from the rather large audience we have today. To start our panel discussions, for me, in addition to all the very interesting aspects of the 3 projects that you all shared, what binds together the 3 rather different projects is a sense of enabling justice through our projects, regardless of scale, genre, and locations. All 3 projects, in my opinion, propagate a sense of social justice and or environmental justice, both of which are so lacking in the world we live in today, and some of which we all, to varying degree, are responsible for, for the propagation of, if you don't mind me, do a bit of self-criticism of ourselves as designers, engineers, and architects. But to start a panel discussion, I wonder if any of you would like to briefly talk about justice as a design motivator or driver in your work. Perhaps, Pearl, would you like to speak to this a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rizal. I think Kampong Admiralty being a Well, it's a public building, and there is some social agenda to it as well. I think when we started looking at the project, the location is actually it is a location of prime estate. And during the initial design process, of course, because there are many agencies co-locating that facility, so it is a question of what are who are going to get the ground floor to use, which is again of prime estate value as well. But actually, we created public spaces that connects, that become the heart of the community. I mean, it's a space that is tropical. It's people are able to come and use it. They pass through it. They pass through it to go to the train station every day, and there is activated by shops and all that. So it's a very people-centric kind of designing public spaces, bringing back public spaces to kind of central location, next to a train station. Yeah, I think in many parts of the world, the train station is actually a very public space. Yeah, and so this project tries to give as much public space back to the community. Yeah, that's my thought. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Prasoon, would you like to talk to the topic of justice, environmental and social? And I know your work is highly cognizant of some of the injustice that we have around us.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I should commend you with starting with some self-criticism on it. I think we are all part of that story, right? And I think that the key thing about understanding justice through design from a social and environmental aspect is just the fact that the opportunity that a designer has in their hand is to create a world through their work which has equality. So everyone has an opportunity for equal access to resources, and therefore the environmental damage or the distribution of resources is reduced. At the same time, we have the same opportunities through our buildings. But I think we all kind of understand this idea, we speak about it, and we can do them at project level, right? We can go out a project like Paul mentioned, and we can deliver it on that particular project. But I think where these things can actually make a difference is if we can stop looking at them at a project level, but really imbibe them as values in everything that we do in our companies and in our work and with all the clients that we do. And I remember reading an article a couple of weeks ago in the newspaper, which talked about the fact that one of the companies in Singapore is doing a shopping mall in Dubai, which is 5 times the size of Vivo City, right? So when we do projects like that, and we do one project where we may be doing less impact on the environment, then the negative impact of the other project completely negates what we are doing in here. So do we have the ability to, within our framework, do the right thing and equalize it and make sure that the design carries that forward, not only at a project level, but at values level?
Yeah, thank you. So the question of scale is one that obviously matters. We do say in design, or somebody else said that size doesn't matter, but scale does, and maybe size does matter. In fact, when it comes to addressing the challenges that we are all facing at the moment. There are a couple of questions from the audience about the projects, about the presentations that you have made. Maybe I just try to raise them here. There's sort of one, I think it's addressed to Pearl. Pearl, it's sort of like the factual question being asked. I think about any particular issues to do with issues on post-completion. Did you have any feedback from the Admiralty Kampong project to share? Pros and cons of this concept learned for future work. I'm not 100% if I fully understand the question. I'd wonder whether it's about the partial completion, or is it about feedback from the people who've lived there? I know you shared with us something about, obviously, the biodiversity that exists in Kampong Admiralty as opposed to a similar sized park, etc. That is, I suppose, a feedback from our other friends, other species, that they like Kampong Admiralty a little bit more than the other landscape park. But do you have any other feedback from people who've lived there, and how they are enjoying the project?
I think I've heard good feedback. I think the elderly residents who booked the flats and finally moved in, they themselves were surprised by the layer of programs in the building, the kind of convenient access that they can have. Literally the healthcare, the supermarket, their needs can be met at the doorstep, because I think this could be the first development that integrate elderly public flats into a project like this. Yeah, so I think this integration, it draws a lot of good feedback from the residents, and it seems that as a result of that, they were very active. I mean, there are active volunteers from them in the urban farm in the same building, and also volunteer at the elder care center in the same building. Yeah. So I think the integration brings quite good a lifestyle to this elderly residents.
Great. Carlos, a question on a theme coming on sustainability. A little bit of an introduction on the question by me. Obviously, sustainability has been the buzzword across various industries and disciplines, at least since the 80s, when it was somewhat officially sort of described in the now very famous Brundtland report. It's been guiding a lot of what we do as architects, engineers, and designers, and what we've done in the past 40 years or so. Some believe now that it no longer responds to the challenges we're facing. Others go further and say that the whole premise of sustainability was flawed right from the beginning, that the notion of nature being out there and as a resource for us to use, which is one of the tenets of sustainability, that we are allowed to go there and use the resources of the nature, as long as we leave enough for our future generations to use. That tenet is somewhat flawed. Some argue, obviously now. In either case, we seem to need a major shift in our paradigm vis-a-vis our relationship with nature. Whether sustainability was wrong from the beginning, or it evolved into what has now happened. Now, particularly in our industry, the built environment, which is a major user, consumer of materials, and a major polluter of the environment. Would you like to speak to that and tell us a bit about how your projects and the work that I know you are doing, one of which, a couple of which you shared, but one of which, AirMesh, the award-winning design, how do they take a sort of different path to the sort of business as usual, or the sustainability as usual path of extract, use, dispose model? I think you're mute.
Definitely a change of paradigm, as you shared. It's definitely a new time for designers to address the sustainability question from a different angle. It's never anymore to use nature as just a source of resources, but now we're looking at designs that really are plugged in and integrated within nature. So it's more symbiotic, it's more like design from a broader vision. So we tackle that from different sides. On my side, I mean, the 1% here, which is like the reduction of resources. So first is like reduction of material, reduction of energy on the production of our built space. So it has to do with optimization of processes. But not only that, also we're looking at other sources of materials that are more sustainable. So we're actually implementing upcycling processes in the fabrication of spaces. And now we're looking at facade panels that can be 3D printed with plastic collected from the oceans. We try to give second life to materials in a way that we can extend their life and produce novel designs with it. So I think also we need to create through our production, through our designs, a certain culture that things can be done differently. I think in industry, typically things are quite well established. So it's very difficult to disrupt the way that, you know, traditional buildings are done using traditional materials, traditional processes. So I really think that we have to say to start like showing a different way to establish a relationship with nature that affects different layers. It's not just only at the material level. Definitely as architects, I think we own geometry, so we need to actually use it in a smarter way. There's a lot of designs now bio-inspired using biomimicry. So it's like many different new inputs that are changing the landscape in which we design. And I think it's just the beginning. I would say you can see that trend from different sides, not only from the construction industry. So everyone wants to change the way that they do things. Every industry is actually looking at sustainable process. So I think it's a really good sign to look at those opportunities as designers to change the way that we do things.
Fantastic, thank you. A couple of questions on the sort of some of the facts of what was presented from the audience. Prasoon, there's a question whether you actually had foundations or pad footings, etc., under the container part of the school building. Did you have footings, or were they just would spread the load themselves and sit on the ground or something?
We did build a concrete pad on which the containers were sitting.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. Obviously, your presentation and the answers to the couple of questions I've asked you has generated a lot of interest, a lot of questions coming, particularly perhaps in response to the response that you guys gave on the sustainability theme, because and what some feel ought to now replace that, and which is regenerative design. So something for Pearl, I usually use Kampong Admiralty as an example of a successful regenerative thinking beyond regenerative design, or the umbrella under which regenerative design sits. In some of my talks, the project addresses regeneration at many levels of design integration, and you mentioned that, social integration that you beautifully mentioned, and the environmental justice that we spoke about earlier. Nirmal's book, Ecopuncture, so beautifully also discusses these two. I think there is address to that in Flourish, the book by Sarah Ichioka and Michael Pauling. Both of these books I highly recommend to our audience at the moment. Would you like to tell us a bit about the regenerative aspects of Kampong Admiralty? About you've obviously touched on some of it. Now you have a bit more time to specifically talk about those aspects, about how the project heals us more rather than hurt us less, which was one of the descriptions of sustainable design.
I think we want to actually we always strive to design the building as a breathable building, a building that that allows ventilation, allows breeze to come through, allow a lot of natural light to come through. So I think being a breathable building brings a lot of benefits. Yeah, and in that way, it's not just good for the users of the building, but also for the greenery that we have in the building. I think the other aspect is that in Kampong Admiralty, we actually built up quite a robust blue and green infrastructure. So we're thinking of the building system and the green system. Yeah. So the blue is the stormwater system, that it's managed. It's make sure that there's less runoff and there's more a collection and reuse and recycle of water. And of course that integrates very closely with the landscape that we're trying to create. Together with our consultant, actually we actually layered the green into the building. So it's not just on one level, but I think we realized there was so much benefit of that the biodiversity start to happen when the greenery was kind of interconnected across vertically. Yeah. So there was quite a lot of good findings in our biodiversity survey. Yeah. So this blue and green infrastructure kind of is the main regenerative efforts in the building. Of course, the landscape, the tree species, we were very intentionally doing more edibles. Yeah, and so it does bring benefits in terms of, there is a farm, there is more edibles coming out of it, and people in the end enjoyed it because they're living there, they're taking care of it. So it's a little bit of a table, farm to table kind of thing happening. Yeah.
Great. You clearly mentioned that this was obviously a pioneering approach to a mixed development, an integrated development, truly integrated development. One of the things that I always wondered was when you guys create these sort of village development communities, whether it is here or in your Dawson project, sort of the vertical neighborhoods sitting on top of one another, you obviously reduce journey and you reduce on trips for people going to shop or going to the park or going to the medical center or wherever it is that they want to go. And by virtue of that, you reduce the demand on roads and cars and everything else. You must have some feedback on how you generally reduce the energy use of people getting from one place to another throughout their days or weeks when they live there, and how that obviously reduces demand on traffic and everything else, whether that is intentional, part and parcel of work, or that is like a byproduct of the beautiful regenerative thinking that you guys have.
Actually, that's definitely the idea we had for Dawson, the Skyview at Dawson. That's why the Sky Villages was kind of 11-story kind of proportion. We think that with 11-story, then it's just 3 or 4 floors up or down to access outdoor garden space, rather than take the lifts and go down a 50-story building, for example. Yeah. So I think in terms of that, it helps with that the energy footprint for high rise and high density development that we are doing here in Singapore. Yeah.
True. One of the things that I read about Dawson feedback during the use of the building was, as opposed to an otherwise a similar, maybe perhaps more conventional high-rise development with the same profile of users, more people in Dawson tend to know their neighbors than they would in an otherwise, other conventional high-rise. Is that something you have some numbers on off the top of your head to share with us?
Not really numbers, but I think that the architecture helps to do that, because we were thinking about a kind of like because if you know your neighbor very well, right? So in a sense, there is a social structure there. Or you can use the word social surveillance, because you in your coming in, going out, or the sky garden, you can see your neighbors. So I think that helps in the process of making a community or making friends with each other and then form a community. So we think that would sustain. It's actually also community sustainability, if you like, because if you are not very rooted in a community, then the tendency would be to move to a new place, right? If your life cycle changes, or your seasons of life changes. Yeah. So I do have numbers, but I think that the structure creates the environment, of getting.
Fantastic. It's actually creating communities, truly, placemaking and community making through design and through architecture, which you have commendably done in more than one of your projects, of course. One specific questions about from the audience about Kampong Admiralty is obviously the one-stop integrated complex, whether you had any stringent requirements from different authorities, perhaps MOH or just HDB alone as a client. Were there specific challenges that you faced with those?
Yeah, actually, there are technical challenges from different agencies, of course. There's one very interesting one, which is because the land is limited and we had to actually stack up the facilities, and we had to convince that the quieter nature of those, for example, childcare and elder care, should be at the upper floors. And it's not something, it is but for the agency, they actually prefer, for example, childcare to be at the lower floor because of fire safety and so on. Yeah, but because we put it at the upper floor together with the garden, and the garden became sort of like a outdoor space that is a refuge area where, if there's any emergency, and you can slowly evacuate elderlies and children, by using all these open air sky terraces, as refuge area. So I think it turned out to be it works. They get a quieter environment, and it's ultimately also safe. Yeah. So this is one of those challenges that we had. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, great. Thank you. Prasoon, a number of questions are coming from the audience, mainly anonymous attendees, about your project. Obviously, your approach has generated a lot of interest. One question is thanking you for the presentation, and of course is saying how inspiring it is to work, to see your work. The question is, I wonder, can you share the processes of designing and implementing the school projects that you presented? What were some difficulties that you might have encountered, and how did you overcome them? You addressed some of them in your presentation. Would you like to elaborate on some? I'm sure you had more problems than you shared with us.
Firstly, I think the problems were nothing unusual to any other project. I think every project has its sense of problems and challenges that to overcome, right? So, and the fact that we had taken this project upon ourselves, so we were prepared that the problems would probably be a little bit different than what we may face in other project. And I think the key issue really was the availability of the materials. One of the things I think we really like in projects like like ours is to use local materials and low impact materials, but they are not available in large numbers of the right quality to be able to build it fast enough. So for us to get wood, and we were actually using recycled wood that we could get, we're looking at recycled containers that we could get, but assembling all these things together at the right time on the site, maintaining them, is actually not an easy task. And that, I think, was a critical challenge that we faced. And Al Sabah is also a region with very long monsoon months. So that would stop the work for a couple of months. So we couldn't build a school fast enough as well. And I have a feeling that if we would have done probably a more conventional building, just using concrete and brick blocks and bricks and block work, we could have probably found much more labor, which is used to it. And we could have probably delivered the school much faster as well. So I think that's a key challenge when we start working with materials which are local, where the expertise is also limited and so is the material.
I just wondered, Prasoon, one of the things that we keep talking about, hear about paradigm shift, about change, about moving from the sustainability curve to the regenerative design curve. Change, of course, creates some issues, some challenges. I just wondered whether that should not be one of the tests that we have for our next projects. That if we feel a little bit more uncomfortable, if we feel a little bit more challenged, it probably means that we're doing something new, or we're probably doing something differently, and that could be the test of that we should be pursuing these sort of new ideas, where there are not as many people who are used to building these things, using these materials, and as the more the challenges are, the more perhaps we are doing the right thing in inviting and embracing change that we need.
I mean, I think that's a great point, and that's something that we think about literally every day, right? And that the number of challenges is faced, and our job really, I think my job as a leader of the organization is really to try and reduce these frictions that innovation and new approaches bring, right? So how can we reduce them and tackle lesser and lesser of those, right? So the fact that we could build such a school in Malaysia in a very remote location is quite possible. If I was to try and do this in Singapore, even though this might be the correct way to do in terms of sustainability and environment and materiality, just the regulations here wouldn't allow me to do this. So, and I can't go and fight the system to build the right kind of building here. So my kids, like I was showing the picture, study in a school which is totally not sustainable, but the school teaches them about sustainability, but they can't observe them in that environment. So we as an organization and me as an individual have taken an approach to say, how can we reduce that friction as much as possible and only fight one fight at a time as we move along, because we just don't have the capacity. And this probably leads to maybe an example I would want to share of some of the new work that we are doing, which is in the Philippines, where we are building these net zero home communities now. And we found that when we started going and pitching it to developers who are our partners there, that the level of change that we were bringing in through that project of building a net zero building in terms of materials, construction technologies, methodologies, financing, energy production, water, sewage, food production, we had all these things, and then community aspects, some of the things that Pearl talked about, we realized that those were just too many for anybody to handle. So we kind of stripped it down of everything. And we said the only thing we would go in our first project to make sure that innovation goes through is really focus on two aspects, which is energy and net zero because of energy, and the financing based on energy, because there's a lot of impetus today in the world in monetizing energy, and there's money flowing in there. And we thought that we will only focus on this aspect in the first project that we are building. And as we prove our success in it, then we will push in the ideas of better materials, new construction technologies, water, step by step, and be able to deliver our entire vision, which will probably, I don't know, take many, many years.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Carlos, as an engineer, it's like, looking at your projects, it's like a kid going to a candy shop. of course, right? As a member of the jury, when I saw that project, of course, it's all my sort of lights went on, and the beautiful work that you and your team are doing. There is a question from the audience, and then there is a question from me. A question from the audience, and I must admit, I'm having a bit of a problem reading these questions because of some typo things that zeros are typed as O or O's are typed as zero, and somehow it becomes a bit cryptic. But what I understand from the question is something that, are you working on, or is there a way to make the sort of the nodes of AirMesh even simpler, so that it can be even more widely used and produced by others?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. As we're working now on new version of the AirMesh system, so we're actually trying to solve these problems that we found when we built the first version in Gardens by the Bay. So I think, the question is more like, can we simplify? I mean, we will simplify maybe the way that we can assemble the structure, or even the assembly sequence. So we are working on that in a way that it can become a product. It can become something that we can do anywhere in Singapore or in the world. We can send the parts and can be easily assembled. The complexity of the project is not going to be reduced. Actually, is enhanced. We're actually tackling more interfaces with facades, with other members, like are not just bar to bar, but bar to ceiling, bar to facade. So we're actually making it more complex. So we want to get it industry ready. We want to get it ready to be used in commercial architecture or in public buildings. So we are actually working now in a new version in which we're using a higher grade steel. We want to get the approval from BCA for permanent construction by end of the year. So that will allow us to really expand the use of the system and to test it in different conditions. We think that we can target different functions and scales, from a domestic problem that could be like extension of a house, or working in a very like intricate location, to something quite large and using long span structures. So that's why we need to actually improve basically the way that the users or the construction company are gonna actually put it together, because in the end it becomes a quite complex IKEA kind of structure, right? You need to find the piece, you need to put it in the right place, you need to connect it somehow. So I think that's one of the big things we're working on, and we hope we can solve that by end of the year.
Fantastic, that's great. Another related question is whether you're envisioning reusing the material of the pavilion at Gardens by the Bay after the exhibition. Is that going to be a permanent exhibition? No, a permanent feature there?
Well, for this pavilion in particular, we got the approval from BCA for 3 years in Gardens by the Bay. So we are actually fulfilling these 3 years. After that, we'll be moving the pavilion back to SUTD. And the plan is actually to keep it in SUTD as a living research piece. So we want to keep it as a way to test new ideas, new versions, new connection systems. So also for students and a new generation of architects to somehow to get inspired, to really see one of the milestones we have achieved in SUTD, that hopefully is the seed of many more, right, in the next year. So we want to keep it there for everyone to see over time, but also for us to keep testing new ideas on it.
Great. The last question that I have for you, Carlos, is the PDA jury citation. I'm not sure whether it's confidential or not, but I sort of wrote it for a big chunk of it, because that was like an engineer's dream, as I said. It recognizes as a sort of cutting edge technology which firmly puts Singapore at the heart of additive manufacturing. One of your nodes, in fact, looked like a human heart, and the pun was intended there. And in the case of working with 3D printed stainless steel, which reduces material usage by orders of magnitude, you said is more than 90% of the node is air, which is like 3. right? But after this massive achievement and the winning that you deservedly did, my question would be to you, like, what is you shared some of it with us, but what is cooking in your SUTD lab now that you haven't shared with us?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's many things going on right now. I think we're getting a lot of traction, collaboration with government and with industry. We're looking at sustainable ways to impact the built environment. One of them we're actually working really full time on. It's on developing components from waste, from discarded parts, from plastic, from basically turning waste into functional parts, either composites or facade panels. So for us, it's one layer we're actually pushing because actually synergistic with the AirMesh system. We think that we have the structure, but also we need to target other layers of buildings. We want to explore also the facade system so we can integrate both synergistically. And one more thing we're pushing strongly as well is the challenge of 2030 food security in our HDBs. So we're working now with HDB to explore lightweight facades in a way that we can use the facades that are not open to the views to grow veg and to have like farm to table or the facade to table almost zero carbon footprint there. So we're actually working with our systems to develop that new opportunity for Singapore to grow food in their HDB, so which is quite exciting too.
Great, fantastic. From one favorite to another one of not only this project, but Prasoon's general work. I was fortunate enough to be on the PDA jury in 2018 as well, when you turned up and you presented your shelter project. And the sort of the motivation for that was that you turned up and said that I'm going to this is a shelter for people who can't even afford to live in slums. For some of us, slums are the lowest form of living, but this you're actually catching people who could not even be on that ladder, step on the ladder. Then in 2020, you turned up, and your motivation was that I've done a school for children who do not even exist. I mean, officially, it did not exist on any country's register, as you shared with us. Both super and honorable causes, of course. But the question is, like, how do you think of such worthy causes and dreams, and then not only keep them at dream level, but go ahead and realize them with such determined manner? And what's next? We have about 8 seconds officially on my time here, but I'm told that we could have a few minutes more. Can we have a few minutes more? Beautiful people here have beautiful things to say.
I appreciate that
okay.
question, and I'll probably take a few seconds to just answer that question. Right, I think when I founded BillionBricks, I actually went to the boss of my old company where I was working, and I said I want to quit and I want to start this company, and I want to do something which is really like something that we want to speak about, but we don't really take action, right? And the idea was really to focus on housing. And my boss, who is now my co-founder, he actually asked me that time, Prasoon, a lot of work happens in slums and you keep hearing about housing things, but what do you think is the most difficult thing to do? And would you have the ability to focus on the most difficult part of problem to be solved, because that's no one is solving? And that's how the idea emerged that BillionBricks wouldn't want to work in slums, but we would want to go for people who are below the level of slums and really find communities which are extremely disadvantaged, where even NGOs and even corporates don't want to go and work on our sites, right? So that's how the idea actually emerged. It wasn't really my idea. And I think the motivation for me has primarily been the fact that I find that there are so many good people in the world who support us, who believe in us, who push us. And for some reason, I don't know what, but we've been able to sustain ourselves and continue on that pathway, right? And our ambitions have just become stronger and stronger. And there's just too many people in the world who want to do the right thing, and we can connect with them.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And Pearl, I would like to give you the last say in the next couple of minutes, given that the percentage of the audience that we have who are architects and practicing architects is quite high. So we'd like to finish with you. Of course, Prasoon is also an architect. Carlos, are you an architect by training?
Yes.
Of course, so 3 architects. Good. Pearl, can you motivate us a little bit? The sort of work that Woha has been doing, and you're now known worldwide. You're winning international awards, like Kampong Admiralty won the Building of the Year at CTBU Edge, or Council for Tall Building and Urban Habitat. Recently, the beautiful work that you've done at the Dubai Expo, Singapore Pavilion. Can you motivate us to try and be like you a bit, do work of the type that you guys do, generating regenerative design, combining nature with the natural environment, with the built environment, the way you do? Your 2 minutes starts now.
I think you shouldn't need motivation. I think we are all motivated to want to have a better environment, right? Because we know once we destroy it, the impact is very hard to reverse. Yeah. And I think we should think of creating food, for example, extending green footprint a bit at a time. Yeah, and think of ways to connect footprints. So it doesn't, of course, we can do it on a grand scale, but every building counts, right? Because each one can create a footprint that's worth connecting to a bigger strategy. Yeah. So I think, yeah. I think it's, especially after the pandemic, I think it's everyone has got this greenery or biophilia on their priority list already, for example. Yeah, it's no longer needed to persuade them, because everyone knows that, clean air and clean environment it should be on our priority. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the argument has been won. The deniers amongst us are very, very few. You're absolutely right. What differentiates us between are not between those who know and who do not know, but between those who do and do not do. It's about acting. And someone said the delayers are the new deniers now. Those who know but do not do are in the issue of the environment. On that note, and with 5 minutes and 11 seconds overrun, my apologies to our dear MC Juliana, and I thank you, the 3 of you, for the beautiful work that you do, and pass you to Juliana. Thank you.
Thank you so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much once again, Dr. Razai, for keeping time so accurately, and for our recipients for sharing your experience with our audience. To our audience, we'll also appreciate it if you could help us to complete a short survey for this webinar to help us to improve on our future programs. For BOA and SIA members, a gentle reminder for you to fill in the survey form with your relevant details to qualify for the CPD points. There will be a special giveaway where you can receive an exclusive hard copy of the PDA 2020 publication when you share your greatest takeaway from the webinar. So right now, please do scan the QR code for the survey form. And if you would like to find out more about the various upcoming programs the National Design Center has lined up, do also scan the QR code that you see on the screen. And with that, we will be ending the session for today. Thank you once again to all of our speakers and to all of you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. We certainly look forward to seeing you at our future events. Have a good evening ahead, and goodbye.